Hello, everyone. We are going to start in some minutes, but first of all, I would like to say thank you for your time and for joining our webinar. As you know, Epicflow starts its permanent section of online events, and I'm happy to introduce you our today's host, Jan Willem Tromp. A Dutch AI researcher with 25 years of experience and MPM and business consultant and a co-founder of Epicflow. And now please meet our guest, Jan Hindrik Knot, a project manager with over than 35 years of experience, IT governance consultant, and line manager. So please enjoy our conversation. Feel free to write your messages, and our experts will answer you a little bit later during QA session. And now let me just give the floor to Jan Willem, and let's start.
Thank you, Anastasia. I'm honored to have you here, Jan Hindrik. We already know each other for quite some years. Your experience in project management is much more than my experience. And regarding time, I would directly go to the first question. What is a project disaster?
There's a very simple answer for it. The logical case of a project disaster is, of course, a project that doesn't deliver anything. That's the most obvious disaster, and I've seen a few of those. The next thing to realize is that we have to distinguish between project disaster and project management disaster. To start off with one of my personal disaster projects that was happening starting this century, I was managing a project to deliver a new mortgage product to the market. And it was a beautiful product. It had everything. It had investment opportunities, all kinds of beautiful choices, everything. And we did a project and we did it all. We set up a back office, we set up the IT systems, we did that launch campaign, everything. And it came in beautifully within budget and on time and everything. So from project management perspective, it was a success. However, not a soul actually bought the product. So from the perspective of the bank that was sponsoring this, it was a disaster. It was a project disaster. With hindsight, it was a completely superfluous project. They should not have done it. And that brings me to what actually really is a project disaster. And for me, there's only one criterion there. A project disaster is a project that doesn't realize its business case, period.
Okay. And do you have some examples from that, from your experience, Jan Hindrik?
Oh, I've played around quite a lot with business cases and projects. One of the things we did at ING where I worked was actually define a standard business case and do an analysis on the sensibility and how the business case is influenced by tweaking the parameters. It's actually a quite useful exercise because sometimes you find out that the business case is driven by external factors. Many profits in the banking sector are made by comparing the price you have to pay for actually obtaining the money on the financial markets and the interest rate you can charge to your customers. That margin determines practically the profitability of any product. If you know that, then you know that most projects can even survive business case wise, like even if the project cost doubles, even if the project is like 5-6 months over time. If the market conditions are there, you make money. It probably also explains why generally always banks are making money, by the way.
This is interesting because it looks like you split the business case from the project triangle, scope, time, and budget.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
First, let's point out that the business case is not the responsibility of the project manager, but of the project sponsor.
Okay.
That's given also by Prince 2. It's given by the PM BOK and every standard I know. But in many cases, project managers either are feeling themselves responsible for the business case, or they are pushed into that position by the project sponsor. And sometimes it's very hard to push back on that. And that actually leads in project management country to some very cramped project management styles, where project managers actually are very strongly protecting the scope of their project and basically saying no to every proposal that is made by customers, by experts in their own organization. Scope creep is not a bug, it is a feature. It is how projects react to changing circumstances, to insights that grow while you're executing the project. Don't be afraid of scope creep. That would be my message from this. But if you have scope changes, do it in a very well controlled manner. Change your plans, think about everything. And of course, go to your project sponsor and say, hey, listen, if I extend the scope with this, this, and this, we can do this, this, and this, and it's all very nice and everybody wants it. And as a project manager, you have to be the organizer and orchestrator of that process without actually taking ownership of the business case.
Basically, what you're saying, a business case is underlying changes because of market changes. And I like what you said, is that scope creep is a feature. It's not a burden.
Nope.
By definition.
Nope.
Okay. And do you have an example, Jan Hindrik, about a project which scope, time, and budget was really under pressure, but looking from the business case point of view, although that you spent more money, it was a great success?
I've done some projects where that actually happened, where we saw Let me check my cheat sheet for that. I listed all my project disasters, but I actually did not make a list of all my successes, which is actually.
Yeah, but the reason why I ask is that some people could consider this as a disaster, and you say, no, be careful. It's not a triangle as itself, if you have to combine it with the business case.
No, the business case is front and center every time when you consider the scope of your project and the budget of your project and the time of your project. And you should actually investigate how changes in those things will actually influence the business case. The triangle is actually a very useful instrument. I actually used it talking to my sponsor, actually giving him a paper and a pen, and say, where do you want to be on the project, in the triangle? And usually they start out somewhere in the budget. So, okay, so budget is the first thing. So I can actually take stuff off the scope. I can take, I don't have to worry about quality that much. And then they are like, no, that is not what I mean. And they actually, then you see the pencil actually sliding over the paper. And in the end, you get a point, and actually the point is not that important where you end up, but is installing the awareness with your sponsor that these things are trade-offs.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the next thing is, okay, let's look at the business case and see if we can extend the triangle. If you look at the business case and you find out that actually doubling the project cost doesn't really has a minor effect on the business case itself, then you can actually push out a point that says budget further down the paper.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, but if I listen to you, I think a lot of people are aware of this, especially if they are in a position of a project manager of a big project. Still, a lot of things go wrong. And can you elaborate on that from your experience of what you have read in the books, etc.?
Well, my experience, you said some things go wrong. In my experience, everything will go wrong. The only sure thing you know about a plan is that it will not go as like that plan. It's like the whole thing in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where they define a special number, which can be anything except the number. Those kind of things. This is an inside joke for IT people, by the way. Old IT people specifically. Now, your plan, life is messy. You have a beautiful plan. You thought about all the tasks in your project. You know about what the resources you need, what are the dependencies and everything. And then you start working and shit happens. You have people and they don't show up. They have personal emergencies. They can't come to work. They have to attend sports events, for instance. You have all these equipment you need, cranes, stuff. I don't know what you need, but it will break down. Project management is very much about a day-to-day management of little crises.
Okay.
And how do you do that? What helps you actually to handle those? In the very beginning of my career, I was involved in space and doing stuff at European Space Agency. And I had a mentor there who was actually the flight manager of one of the most important scientific satellite missions of the 20th century, the IRAS satellite. It opened up the infrared astronomy for the whole world. And he told me I was to be the manager of that satellite once it was launched. And I spent 2 years planning the use of the satellite. I had 3 thick binders full of plans and contingency plans and everything. And then they launched the thing and they popped off the lid. So the telescope was operational. And he said, I never ever looked into those binders during the year and a half that we ran the satellite. He said, but making the plan took care of the fact that I got a very good mental model in my head about how to run this specific satellite. Okay. And that allowed me to actively find solutions for any problem that came my way. I had a similar experience a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, when I was doing Windows 7 to Windows 10 migration for ING Belgium. We had to do a lot of stuff, but mostly was logistical, replacing laptops, replacing screens, everything. And I took over the project from another project manager in June, and until September, every single day I had what I call an oh shit moment. A moment that somebody comes up with an issue and actually, hey, what do we do about this? And then you also come to another aspect of project management, and I'm going to that in a moment. It's your primary task as a project management to handle these crises. Well, how are you able to handle these crises? You don't know everything. There's a lot of uncertainty, and this is about what another guy, Gerrit Koch, told me many years ago. He was a very good project program manager. He was, in fact, the first IPMA A-certified project manager in the Netherlands. And he said to me, when it comes to project management, he said, 70% of the success of a project manager is determined by interpersonal skills.
Yeah.
If you have those crises, you only have to look confident, even if you are cringing inside. Just radiate, hey, we can handle this. I trust your capabilities. And the moment the team is out of the panic zone, they probably will find a solution. And this was also a very important lesson for me. Don't panic. It's your task as a project manager not to panic, but to make your team aware, get them out of panic mode, get them out of disaster mode, and make them come up with solutions. They usually can, actually.
Okay, but you mentioned the word team. What I see at my customers is that the concept of team is, let's say, different than 20 years ago. That because you have to share resources with other projects, especially with the people that have a lot of knowledge. But if I look at the project management study, it's focusing on project management. But I think one of the external influencing factors is that this is resourcing. Let's focus on people.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts about that and experience?
Yeah, if you are on LinkedIn a lot, like I am, you see lots of discussion about project management techniques, about critical path planning, about Slack on critical path and how to measure that. All these things are nice from a very academic perspective, I think, but I always compare them to to physicists working on agricultural problems. The first thing they do is postulate a perfectly spherical cow in vacuum.
Yeah.
It's nice. It allows you to elaborate and put all nice formulas to it. But in the real world, these things don't happen. If you are doing an enterprise scale project, you will be not the only project in the enterprise. There will be many, many more. Resources will be shared between projects. This is as it is. I did a project once that did endpoint security software installation. And we had to take it over after it had run for 2 years. It was a disaster. Nothing was coming, up to the point that the overseeing authority said, and now you have to fix this thing fast. And what we did in that project was arranging two things. The first thing we arranged was that we could handpick the team.
Okay.
No questions asked. And the second thing is that we got a voucher from the architects that we could use any hardware constellation we needed. So that cut the red tape of all the resourcing, and we had a handpicked team and everything. And next thing we did was define a very minimal viable product that would meet the requirements of the overseer and could be realizable by the few months we actually had. And that we did actually.
So basically you said, in order to save this project, I need a dedicated team. Nobody touches those guys anymore.
No.
I need to, let's say, have freedom on the architecture.
Yes. And the nice thing about this, it also taught me an important lesson. When it was finished, what actually happened, that's what the sponsor said, hey, a project team is a tool. I have a tool now which is very sharp and experienced, and I can use it again. And what he did at that point was actually leave the project intact while it actually had already delivered, and he changed the complete scope.
Okay.
He said, okay, I have a team here which knows everything about all the organization in Europe, everything about Windows, everything. I'm going to have this team and I will let it now do the Windows XP to the Windows 7 migration for ING.
Yeah.
That's the perspective from the project sponsor. For the sponsor, the project is not a thing, the team is the thing.
Yeah.
The team is a tool that gets things done. So he didn't care about budget. He didn't care about scope. He changed everything, but he left the team intact.
Okay. Hey, Jan Hindrik, I want to go to another subject, but before that, I would give the listeners the opportunity to give some questions and that you can respond on it. So, Anastasia, do you already have some questions available?
Yeah, we can back to questions a little bit later, so you have your time to talk.
Okay, good. Then we can continue. You just described a beautiful example of a dedicated team, and let's say you had an agreement with your sponsor, and it even ended up in changing the scope, extending the scope, I should say.
Yeah.
But in my experience, all the companies I visit, they have a multi-project environment where resources have to work in several projects simultaneously. And
yes.
that creates a totally different environment. What's your experience on that?
Every large organization I've worked the last decade had this. On average, they had like 50, 60, 70 projects at the same time in flight. They had elaborate procedures for fulfilling resource requests.
Yeah.
That is the life we live in at the moment. And unfortunately, many project managers are now very expert on fighting for resources. They see it as their main task. I need resources. Let's do this. In fact, I did that too. When I had this opportunity to do it for a very critical project, the first thing I said, I don't want to do the resource battle. I want handpicked resources, no questions asked. I actually evaded that whole thing at that point. But yeah, resources are messy, and you see disasters growing there. You see people, especially expert people like experienced architects, those kind of people. And I can assume that in engineering projects you have resources like that too, very good designers, those kind of people, and they are allocated to like 5-6 projects at the same time, and I'm amazed that they are not completely driven crazy all the time, actually.
Maybe they are already.
Well, but I cannot imagine they are as productive as they could be.
Yeah. What I see a lot, Jan Hindrik, in this regard is that on day one they work on project A, on day two they work on project B, etc. And what are your thoughts about that? Because this is the solution people think will work.
At this very moment, I'm not working as a project manager, but as a subject matter expert consultant. And
Yeah.
I am exactly in this position at the moment. I have to switch contacts like 3 or 4 times a day. And then it's driving me crazy at the moment and looking for a holiday. But it's very time constrained. But yeah, it doesn't get the best out of me. Actually, to be productive, I have to actually cut all channels and actually dive into into my own laptop and just put off, just switch off Teams, switch off email, and be not available for a while, and then try to come into the zone, as they call it, and actually get output.
So switching contacts is a disaster.
For me, it is, and I can't imagine there's any person that's actually enjoying it.
And what is the other effect? Look at waiting times.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of something I read about the immigration services in the Netherlands. They have to actually handle the files of all these asylum seekers and migrants, and somebody actually researched this, and what they saw was that actually the general median through time of the file, so from the moment it's raised until the decision, was like 6-7 months, and it's now even a few years, I think. But when you look at the time actually spent on processing the file, it was like 2 or 3 days in total. So this is one of the more disastrous consequences of having context switching all the time. Why can you not organize that kind of work so that once you have one person finished, the next person actually picking it up, and then the next person, and then you have the core organization, and it's done. And this is also the whole context switching thing. This is not from projects, but I think it's a comparable case.
But I learned, I think almost 20 years ago from Elie Schagenheim. I believe he's in the room, and he learned me that don't do this, because context switching is bad, called multitasking, and you just create waiting times. But if I look at the market, they are still doing it. It's even worse. They expand in doing it, making it worse and worse.
Yeah, well, it is unavoidable context switching.
Yeah.
Because also people tend to have a private life in the COVID times, and actually, you run a washing machine while working. Yeah. So you have the context switch. You will have it. Something will happen. The cat will walk into the room demanding food. This is the real life example from my perspective. I have a cat with inbuilt clock, and it will just show up at 15:30 and demand food. So context switching is unavoidable, but you should at least try to avoid it as much as possible. So if you can find a way to prevent context switching, everybody profits.
Okay.
And this is about resource management. It's not only about actually assigning resources to projects. It is also about how do these projects handle the resources. What are the critical resources? What are the real hard milestones in the projects?
Yeah.
And this is a kind of planning stuff that is not handled at the moment in the project management tooling market. At least I haven't seen anything that actually. I've worked with Clarity, I've worked with Primavera, I've worked with ServiceNow. All these toolings are perfect for administrating what's happening, but and no tool actually can do this at the moment. That's a fact.
Okay, I will come back to that because it's now 25. I would like to start with questions from the audience, and then I come back to this subject. Okay, I hope everybody can read it. What project management methodology is, in your opinion, the best one today in the long run? And is it a one-fits-all solution? Now, interesting question, Jan Hindrik.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, actually. Well, I've used several methods. I've used Prince2. I've used, I got a PMP license. Well, I don't have it anymore. It elapsed. I've done some other things. I go back to my old mentor, Gerrit, and he said 70% of the project managers' effective quality is in the interpersonal skills. Only 30% is methodology. What I take from methodology general is basic project hygiene. You have some hygiene, you have to have administration, you have to have a plan, you have to have reporting. All those kind of things should be in place. And if you compare methodologies, they are more or less the same when it comes to those things. So
Okay.
I don't have a favorite project management methodology. Usually the sponsor or the organization will prescribe which one to use. In the long run, in one fits all solution, no project management methodology can handle multiple projects. All project management methodologies are aimed of executing a standalone project.
Okay, a single project, yeah.
In that sense, no project management methodology is actually good.
So basically, if you talk about waterfall, it's in one project. If you talk about agile, it's one project.
It's always the assumption that you can handle it. It's in our nature as people actually to try to compartmentalize things in order to get some grip and control about it. But if you zoom out, you see that this is all quite illusionary. There is no control about these kind of things. There is no methodology that actually does this.
So you could question about project control, because if you are in a multi-project environment, probably project control is one of the hardest things to do because it looks isolated.
Yeah, we also have to ask what it doesn't mean actually to be in control of your project. As a project manager in a multi-project environment, that can even extend to your project using resources from a complete chain of organizations and companies, you will never be in control over the resources you get. You have to release the idea that you can control your resources. So what is then left about your responsibility as project manager? Also, what I always say, if you do not control the resources, you cannot control your budget, you cannot control your time and everything. So this changes in multi-project organization, the role of the project manager. What can you still do? You are still responsible for the day-to-day crisis. Like I told earlier, that's still your responsibility. But it's the responsibility of the organization to actually set up effective ways to allocate resources in such a way they are not overloaded, that they can actually work on a project until they are finished with their task at hand, and only then have to change context for another project. Those are those are the things you are still in control of as a project manager. Should be as an organization, but not as a project manager. Let me be precise.
But that means we should look from a different point of view, because I always say my credo is always make sure none of your resources is overloaded, because it creates delays. And the second thing, they become tired, make mistakes, and even worse, they can become ill. But making sure that people are not getting overloaded, you cannot give this in the hand of a project manager, because he has to share the resources. So maybe we should look at it from another angle. From a higher level, let's say it this way, if you look at resource management.
The higher level we're talking about is the portfolio management level, because projects are always allocated in one or more portfolios. I have some experience with portfolio management, and portfolio management is actually resource management. Don't get excited about decision support in portfolio management tooling, all those kind of things. It's just baubles for salespeople. I remember a session at the Dutch National Bank where we had a presentation from CA about the Clarity portfolio management tooling. And the salesperson went in, and there were a lot of senior management in the room, and he had the beautiful bubble graph, and then another beautiful bubble graph, and he was talking about efficient frontier methodologies and blah, 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 blah. And I felt the energy leaving the room.
Okay.
And then almost as an afterthought, he showed some standard reports from the tooling. He said, okay, this shows your project and the resource usage. This is an overall view of all the milestones in all your projects and whether they are threatened or not. And people actually set up like I just did now. They set up straight, and they were in the mode, can I have that?
Yeah.
From a business perspective, actually having the insight on what is in your portfolio is essential. People do not care about decision making and tooling and those kind of things. I had a very, very senior manager of a big company in the Netherlands once tell me, he said, Jan Hindrik, there are only two reasons why we do projects in this company. Reason one, we have to, because for legal obligations or what have you. And the second reason is because somebody with power really, really wants it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the whole thing about tooling and portfolio management is about rationalization of those feelings.
Okay.
It was a kind of blunt, but I always remembered it.
Okay. I want to go to the second question of our listeners, Jan Hindrik. Thanks for sharing your insight. Okay. What do you think about AI mechanisms embedded in modern project management software? How reliable are these predictions? Any thoughts on that?
No idea, but that's one for you because you've been playing around with this.
Yeah, okay. Before answering this, I'll go back to your question, your remark. Basically, what you're saying, portfolio management is not only prioritizing which projects to first, second, and third. In execution, it's resource management. And in this resource management, I want to bring the link with artificial intelligence. By the way, my tutor was Paul Boudreau, from professor in Canada. He really wrote excellent books about it. You can use information in your data by applying AI, and there are different solutions. You can use NLP, looking at text files. That's one part, but you can also look at the data from the past. For instance, what was the difference between our estimations and our actuals? I see a book behind your back from Professor Vlieberg. You bought the book about big projects. This is one of the most fascinating books of the last year.
Somebody recommended it to me.
Yeah,
recently.
but he is looking at project as one, and now we are discussing on projects at portfolio level. So if you can create this data, if you can get this data, you can use it. Exactly what Professor Vlieberg also did, because he has a data bank, I think about 20,000 projects. forgive me if I'm wrong, and he says use the data from the past and learn from it. And AI can help us with that. So you can use text, you can use data, let's call it the numbers, and we in Epicflow are applying those tools already, and that's fascinating. Because I always say, make sure you do not overload your resources. But on planning level, maybe on portfolio, we say everything is fine. In execution, it looks great. But you have to carefully look what is happening in the execution. And as an example, I always say, if one of the resource groups or resource cannot cope with the demand, at the end, the projects will suffer from it. And there is a great opportunity what we are applying in AI. And of course, there are other things like chatbots and that kind of stuff. AI has many subjects. Okay, I hope so for me, predictions is using the data from the past. Anything to add on, Jan Hindrik?
Not specifically about AI thing, but about the overload thing. Do not make the fact that the resources are overloaded the problem of the resources.
Good one.
What I mean is, you see the reflex in management when they have overloaded resources, they ask, just do some overtime, just work a bit harder, and they extend pressure. This is actually the thing that burns people up. Yeah. If you want to look at the root cause of many burnout problems and people leaving organizations, this is one of them. Empower people to choose what they are doing. If it is necessary that a person works on multiple projects at the same time, leave that person in charge on when he works on what projects. Hand him the information about priorities and why and everything. Be open about that, share about it, but then let them please decide what to do when.
So basically what you say, get rid of the structure that on Monday you work for project A and on Tuesday for project B. Now give them a list, a priority list, which gives them something in hand to say, okay, I will work according to this priority list. Doesn't matter in what project, but I'm also allowed to make, let's say, some other decisions.
Yes.
Just because task 1 and task 3 are combined, then I don't have to switch contexts. So I first do 1 and then I do 3 and then I jump over to 2.
That enable people to actually make those choices and take their personal situation also into consideration.
Yeah.
If they know they are going to, in the morning, they go to visit a sick relative or something like that. Don't expect in the afternoon that they do very brainy and a high output through work. Let them do so. Give them the opportunity to do something they can do by road or actually that doesn't actually involve 100% of all their creativity and skills. Also time-wise, if you're on the Friday afternoon, like 1 o'clock, and you finish the task and you're looking forward at the weekend, what do you pick? You pick the thing in your list which you can do like in 2 or 3 hours and have an early day off. It's also about work-life balance and actually enabling people to make those choices. This is about retaining people for your organization by empowering them to actually arrange their own working times and arranging and giving them opportunity to choose what to do when.
Yeah.
It prevents people getting sick, basically. Very simple.
So you need to give them a priority list and you need to give them some freedom to defer from it. We can discuss. Now, I think there are not enough reasons to do it. You already mentioned some. Okay, interesting. Is there another question, Anastasia?
What do you had this one?
Oh, this one we already had. Oh, there's one thing. How reliable are these predictions? I can tell you one thing. If you make predictions of your portfolio based on the estimations and based on an average availability of people, let's say working 80% in projects, you will be wrong. You need to have data from the past that what is the difference between the estimation and the actuals. And actuals, if it is more, that doesn't mean that the guys did the wrong job. It just tells you there's a difference between the actuals and the estimations. And you can use the trends in your AI model to improve this predictions. And by the way, the good thing about AI model is it's self-learning. It's changing through the machine learning concept. It's changing things that change whatever. Like just we have a COVID crisis, which changes a lot, but your AI models should adapt that. Okay, do we have another question, Anastasia? Okay, other questions we do at the end. Okay. You mentioned something last week to me about we have to be aware that we are living in a non-linear world, especially in project management.
Yes.
Can you tell more about that?
What do I mean by non-linear? It's an emerging behavior of complex systems that once the complexity rises, stuff happens that you did not foresee.
Okay.
And this also applies to multi-project environments and resource management. At some point, you are so overloading your resources and you are so creating such intricate webs of tasks and interrelationships and things is that you cannot predict it anymore, not even with AI systems probably. And that's what I meant by, it's a famous phrase, the weather is a non-linear dynamical system. It also applies for if you have like 500 projects with 60,000 resources working on it, it's fundamentally unpredictable. So you have to simplify, you have to compartmentalize and all those kind of things. And also be aware of the fact that this thing will hit you on a Friday afternoon when you don't expect it.
Yeah.
It's principally unmanageable. It's like adding users to an application, and at some point it just isn't able to scale anymore, and it just completely fails for everybody. And if you look at the code and look at the specs of the hardware, you cannot predict this moment.
Yeah, yeah. But I was just thinking, in regards to multi-project environment, if we scatter our resources over more and more projects, we just increase the complexity exponential. Yeah. Basically what you are saying, you should step back a little bit, that you give your resource, your people the possibility to focus, let's say, on a few tasks in one project before they step over to another project. Mm-hmm. Meaning, I think we are creating our own mess again while knowing it.
There are a few ways out of this, actually.
So, excuse me, I could not hear it, Jan.
I think there are a few ways out of this.
Yeah.
The first is scaling down.
Yeah.
When you look at portfolios and all these projects, try to find some kind of grouping in the portfolio. I tried it a few times now, and it's really difficult. The level above the portfolio is a service level. You can define any organization in terms of the services they provide to their environment.
Yeah.
And you can align portfolios with services. And what you can do is take a strategic decision on how important these things are to you, which service is most important than the other service, and allocate your resources according to that. Make a dedicated resource pool for a certain class of services. Those are the kind of things you can do. Actually, in classical organizations, you already saw this, in fact. When you had the old big corporations like the old IBM, they had a mainframe division, they had a software division, and they had what do I know for other divisions? They had these silos.
Yeah.
And actually, what they did actually is create services and link them to a silo and give each silo a budget and resources and everything. Then we made all over in enterprise world, we made a switch where we said we go from customer from basic all the way to the customer. It was the height of the marketing time. Yeah. And we said we're going to break through all the silos, blah, 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 blah. We had marketing and we had production and we had sales. And then we actually lumped all these divisions together and all this resource pool together, and that's now biting us again.
Okay, yeah, it's an interesting thought. So you don't want to have silos in a strict form, but you want to run processes through the silos, correct? And then focus your resources within the silo as much as possible to reduce the complexity. Am I right?
I keep, when I get older, I tend to get more and more, what do you call it? I don't like process anymore, actually.
Oh yeah, yeah.
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 I was once an ITIL expert teacher, and some of my students actually, student asked me once, what is it exactly, a process?
Yeah.
And actually thinking about it, I found out that it's actually nothing. Nobody ever bumped into a process. It's not a physical thing, but that's a completely other discussion.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
not go there. But
Okay.
yeah.
I have another one. Basically, if you look at project portfolio management systems, basically what you are saying, these systems should be able to absorb the dynamics which is coming from the market, which is coming from your own resources, and it should help you to make decisions to simplify the complexity. Because if you have 50 projects or 25 projects, it's a huge difference in complexity.
Yeah.
In running, especially in a multi-project environment. Thank you for that. Okay, this is also the subject that Epicflow is focusing on. Anastasia, do you have another question?
Yes, I have some questions. Give me 1 second.
Okay, then we will wait. She can type it down and everybody can read it. Okay, how can you deal with uncertainties in planning, especially when working with people who are still in the process of learning their craft? Interesting. Very interesting question. I also have some ideas, but first you.
You know, my primary reaction to this is suck it up.
What do you mean by that?
There is no algorithm or procedure or whatever for this. This is the essence of project management, handling uncertainties in planning, uncertainties in resource availability, uncertainties about the market conditions, uncertainties about whatever.
Yeah.
You're a project manager. Suck it up, do it.
But I had one experience within my own company, by the way, and we had to double our team, one of our backend teams. And then everybody thinks if I double my team, then the output will go up.
Yeah.
Wrong. Because in the beginning,
it takes 9 women to produce a child in 1 month.
Yeah. And the output went down, and then we had a steep uprise. So if you are not aware of this, do not take this into account, then after 2 months, because it takes 2-3 months to learn people the skills, your projects can be already in a totally disaster in your portfolio. Yeah. You have to bear this in mind. And I was even thinking in the AI tooling about that on the moment you increase your capacity very fast, you must be aware of the learning effects. First, output drops down, and then afterwards, output can build up. Okay, good. Thank you.
One thing more about this question, actually. I really like how it is posed, actually. How do you work with people in the process of learning their craft? Yeah. I think learning their craft is an excellent expression about project management. Because it is for a large part not a skill you can learn from a book or by having a diploma and a PMP certifications or a Prince2 practitioner. Having those certifications doesn't make you a project manager.
Yeah.
It's a craft. It's like a master carpenter or something, a master bricklayer. It's a craft. You have to do it. And at some point you reflect on what you're actually doing. And then are you really mastering this kind of thing?
Meaning, as a project manager, if you have the feeling I'm fighting constantly about resources, we as an organization have to change, and not me as a project manager.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, Anastasia, do you have another question? What's the best way to visualize progress in your opinion? This is interesting. Well, I also have a meeting about this, but first you, Jan Hindrik.
I don't actually have an opinion about this.
Okay.
First thing I would ask, to what audience?
Now let's start with project
Okay.
portfolio management.
And also, what is progress?
Yeah.
That's also one. Yeah.
Let me try to analyze it. I was in the UK with a big client, and I was talking to business unit managers, and I asked them. Probably you're always asking the questions, how is your project doing? Is it regarding the triangle? Is it in green, yellow, and red? So people always ask, how is the project doing? The question is, if this is enough in a multi-project environment. Because progress on project level, you can answer the question, but maybe you should look at another angle.
You can actually ask, go to the perspective of the person in charge of all these projects.
The portfolio manager.
Yeah, she's walking around and she asks this project manager, how's your project going? And this person says yellow, or it says red, or green, green, green. And then she has gone around through the office.
Yeah.
What actually does she know about that point?
In my view, nothing. I said to those business unit managers, you asked the wrong questions. I think what you should ask, how are my resources doing? Can they cope the demand which is coming from projects? That's a much more interesting question. I would focus on what is happening at the resource level.
If you want to actually want to manage the delivery by projects, that's the right question to ask, I think, yes.
Yeah.
The next question is, of course, will these results actually realize the business cases? But that's a question for another manager.
Yeah, that's another question. I think the business case should also be owned by the portfolio manager, or maybe the guy above, of the person above. But on the moment you have decided to do this project, you have to deal with the uncertainties, of course. And the project manager, portfolio manager, can say we will stop this project or park it for whatever reason.
Postpone it, stop it, kill it.
Sometimes I make a joke that we are going to postpone. No, sorry, we go to stop your project in order to deliver earlier.
Yeah, could very well be.
And that's the most important thing. Okay, Anastasia, we have 5 minutes. So, do you have another question, please? If there are multiple bottlenecks in the project flow, in what way can one detect all of them and make the workflow smooth? It's interesting. The question is, what is a bottleneck? What do you think? Because if we know what a bottleneck is, then we can think about multiple bottlenecks.
I think a bottleneck is resource availability. Almost always it is about resource availability. Yeah. When we did a multi-project, many problems at the same time at ING Postbank to merge two banks, we actually found a resource which nobody expected to need. We ran out of implementation weekends.
Okay.
You only have 52 weekends in a year. And you can only do big changes in information systems in the weekend when you can actually shut them down, replace them, and try to start them up again. This is an example of a bottleneck, a resource nobody actually thought about in terms of we need to manage this.
Okay.
Then we turned the portfolio around and we actually planned everything around the weekends.
Meaning you found the bottleneck, which were the weekends.
Yeah.
And because of knowing this, you could change your plans and taking this into consideration.
And we actually had projects accelerate and get allocated more human resources just to make the implementation window.
So basically, you aligned all those projects in your portfolio on one resource.
Yeah.
Which was the implementation week?
that's a bit simplified, but
Okay.
it was the leading criterion of allocating resources at the time. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is what I learned of the theory of constraint. But I am triggered by the word multiple bottlenecks. I always get allergic reactions if people talk about we have multiple bottlenecks. Because I learned theoretically there's only one bottleneck, and if you do not manage this bottleneck, you will create multiple bottlenecks as an effect. So I prefer to talk about the system bottleneck of the organization, and the other ones are symptom bottlenecks. So if you have a bottleneck somewhere, it creates waiting times, and because it can create idle time at the resources downstream, and because of that, all those resources downstream can become a bottleneck. So multiple bottleneck for me is a sign they don't do bottleneck analysis. So for us in Epicflow, bottleneck analysis is one of the most important keys what we have in our system. Okay, very glad with this question. Anastasia, we have 4 minutes left. One question. Okay, would you have a suggestion on what to do if business and tech do not synchronize their plans while developing a single product? Yeah, yeah. Leave this up as a punchline. How do you call it? To you, Jan Hindrik.
What would you have a suggestion? Also depends a bit on the product, but let's assume for now that the technology is essential for the product.
Yeah.
And that the technology is not the product also.
No, okay. Yeah, yeah.
And then we can rephrase it probably as a resource management problem. Tech has not the resources availability to develop the product in the pace demanded by the business.
So tech, you would say these are the back-end developers, the front-end developers.
Yeah, the with kids, the engineers, I don't know what. They have to build a gizmo and they don't have the time for it.
And don't forget the guys that are responsible for running the systems, because in new projects they're also involved, correct?
Yeah, but let's not open that can of worms, please. Now,
okay.
I don't have really, yeah, but I don't have a magic spell that I can put on this case and say this is how you solve this. Okay. It is indicative, I think, about a generic problem in organizations that marketing and commercial people always claim that it should be done now, it should have high priority, blah, 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 blah. Then go back to the business case.
Yeah.
Do a stress analysis on the business case, how dependent the business case is on delays in delivery.
Yeah.
If you have a very fashionable project, for instance, in the fashion industry, your product only goes for a half year cycle. It's not a tech product, but sometimes you have tech. You need tech to actually manufacture special stuff. Then time to market is very, very essential and can kill your business case. But if you, for other products, 2-3 month delay may not be that really bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, please look at the business case and find arguments that the delay is possible.
Okay. I want to close because we are already 1 hour ahead. But this last question: if the resource manager decides to allocate skilled resources to a different priority project, what actions can the project manager take? So I assume that I have to give away my resources to another project.
Yeah. Tough. Ask resource management why he or she did this. And if there are good reasons for it, just yeah.
But this is interesting because it looks like we have here different levels. On the same level, we have the resource managers and we have the project managers. But I think these decisions should not be made by that level, but by the level above, which is the portfolio management. And then we come back to,
yes.
We come back to what you said in the beginning. Portfolio management is not just prioritizing the projects. No, it's resource management.
Portfolio management is resource management, and very good observation here, Jan Willem. It is if you have the resource manager decide where to allocate resources, you have a wrong organizational setup.
Yeah. Yeah.
The resource manager responsibility is to make sure that a certain amount of resources are available with specific skills and things at a given time. But how to actually leverage these resources, how to assign them to projects, is not a decision for a resource manager.
Yeah. But if you do this means a big change. It changed the role of the project manager, not to fight about resources anymore.
Yeah.
And even changed the role of the current resource manager.
Yeah. In a multi-project environment, the project manager role is not what it is in the project methodology books. It's completely different.
Yeah. I think we should finish with this.
Let's write an article about it.
Yeah. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Jan Hindrik. I like the discussion. I also like the questions. And I also like the conclusion. Basically, your conclusion is multi-project environment. You have to go to the level of portfolio management.